In a distant land, by the edge of the sea, there was a kingdom unlike any other. Its laws were strange, especially the law of kingship. A man could only reign as king for 1 year. After his 12 months of power, he was taken from his palace, stripped of his crown, and deported to a distant island. No king had ever returned. The people accepted it as tradition, never daring to ask why it had begun. It was the way of their land. Some whispered that long ago, a ruler had offended the gods, and this punishment had been set forever. Others believed it was to prevent greed from poisoning the throne. But the truth, hidden beneath centuries of silence, was known to none. One morning, as the sun painted the horizon with gold, the people gathered to witness the farewell of their king. His year had ended, and he was escorted by soldiers to the royal ship. The man, once proud and powerful, now trembled like a prisoner heading to his doom. Mothers clutched their children, urging them to remember the sight, for tradition was sacred. The crowd watched in silence as the ship sailed away, carrying their ruler to the dreaded island. A heavy stillness fell over the harbor. No one dared speak of what happened after, for all knew the island was death itself. On the ship's return voyage, something unusual happened. As the sailors rowed through the quiet sea, they spotted a man floating on driftwood. His face was pale, his clothes torn, and his strength nearly gone. The guards pulled him aboard and gave him water. "Who are you?" they asked. The man's lips were cracked, his voice hoarse. "A wanderer," he whispered, "a survivor of many storms." He spoke little of his past, but when they told him of their kingdom's strange law, he listened carefully. His eyes grew sharp with curiosity. Then the officials asked if he would accept to be king. The stranger was astonished by the question. To be offered a kingdom so suddenly was beyond belief. Yet he was no fool. He had seen too much of life to accept without thought. "Give me time to consider," he said. The officials agreed, though they grew uneasy. For a day he thought, pacing the deck, staring at the sea, weighing the glory of 1 year against the mystery of the island's fate. At last, he nodded. "I will be your king," he said. But he added a strange request, that he be taken to the island first. The officials were surprised, for no man had willingly asked to see the island. Yet, bound by his request, they sailed with him through restless waters and stormy winds. After hours on the sea, the ship neared the dreaded land. Dark forests covered the shore, and strange cries echoed from within. Savage beasts roared from the shadows, their calls chilling the blood. Trees rose, so tall they seemed to touch the clouds. The air itself felt heavy with danger, as if the island rejected human presence, whispering warnings only the brave could endure. The man was taken back to the kingdom, where the people crowned him their new ruler. The bells rang, drums thundered, and voices shouted with joy. To the crowd, he was simply another king destined for 1 year of splendor before ruin. But the new king was calm. He enjoyed the feasts, the fine robes, and the golden halls, yet his thoughts were not lost in pleasure. At night, when others slept, he stared from his balcony toward the sea, his mind unshaken. He remembered the island and what awaited him. He swore to himself he would not end like the others. By his second month, the king quietly summoned 150 of the strongest men in the land. They were hunters, woodsmen, and warriors. He spoke to them in secret, his words carrying both promise and fire. "I have a task for you unlike any other. Beyond the sea lies an island of danger. I will give you gold, land, and honor, but only if you serve me faithfully." At first, the men hesitated. Fear of the island ran deep. Yet the king's words stirred courage within their hearts. And so they went. With swords, axes, and fire, they began the great work. For weeks, the strong men labored. They cut down towering trees and cleared paths through the wilderness. They built camps and drove away the last of the wild animals, pushing them further into the mountains. Some lost their lives in battle against monstrous beasts, yet their sacrifice cleared the way for others to continue. When the king visited the island in secret, he was pleased. The land that had once been a place of fear was now open and filled with sunlight, fertile, welcoming, and alive with potential. By the third month, the king began his first great project. He ordered a leisure house to be built on the island, a place of comfort and beauty. Builders carved wood, carpenters shaped beams, and soon a fine house stood where beasts once roamed. To the people, It seemed the king was simply enjoying his short reign. He wastes treasure, they whispered among themselves, shaking their heads. But in truth, he was preparing his future. The house was not just for rest. It was a symbol, the first stone in a new kingdom of his own making. The 4th and 5th months passed, and the king expanded his plans. He brought farmers to plant fields and gardens. He ordered wells to be dug and roads to be built. He even introduced friendly animals and birds to replace the wild beasts. Slowly, the island became a place of life and joy. Crops swayed in the wind, and children laughed where once monsters roared. Birds filled the air with song, and streams ran clear as glass. The people of the kingdom never guessed. They believed he was lost in luxury, while he was carefully building a secret paradise that would outlive his brief reign. By the 7th month, rumors spread through the kingdom. The king does not fear his end, the people said. Does he not know what awaits him? In years past, kings had grown restless as their time shortened, but this king laughed, feasted, and carried himself with peace. Some thought he was mad, others thought him brave. He moved with confidence, his eyes bright with secret knowledge. The truth was that he had prepared better than any before him. But the people, bound by tradition, could not imagine that anyone could outwit fate. The king's greatest plan came in the 9th month. He sent more builders, more men, and even families to the island. Slowly, a city began to rise. Streets, homes, markets, and gardens filled the land. The island was no longer a prison. It was becoming a true kingdom. Ships brought supplies, people brought skills, and life spread across the once-feared place. Lamps lit the streets at dusk, children played in courtyards, and merchants sold their goods. In silence, the king had created what no other ruler before him dared to dream, a future beyond the crown. When the 10th month came, the people of the kingdom began to mourn. It was tradition to pity their king as his year neared its end. But when they looked at their ruler, they were confused. Instead of sorrow, he was joyful. He sang, he celebrated, and he prepared grand feasts. Why is he not afraid? They whispered. Why does he laugh when death is so near? Their voices carried unease, for no king had ever smiled so close to exile. None could guess the truth, that he was already king of another land, waiting for him across the sea. At last, the year ended. The crown was taken from his head, his robes removed, and the guards led him to the ship. The people watched with pity, believing that he would suffer the same fate as all the kings before him. The ship sailed, and the former king stood tall upon its deck, smiling. His eyes shone with victory, and his heart swelled with pride. What fools, he thought, to waste their years in fear. Did they not know that the wise use today to prepare for tomorrow? His heart burned with triumph as the waves carried him to his destiny. When the ship landed on the island, the guards left him there as tradition demanded. But instead of beasts, he found soldiers loyal to him. Instead of wilderness, he walked into a city filled with laughter, light, and life. The people bowed to him, hailing him as their true king. Music echoed from the streets, banners fluttered in the wind, and children ran to greet him. He had not stepped into exile, he had stepped into glory. From that day onward, he reigned not for 1 year, but for a lifetime. For wisdom had given him what power alone could not, a kingdom without end. Years passed, and the island flourished under the king's wisdom. The once feared land became a jewel of the sea, with thriving farms, bustling markets, and ships that carried trade to distant shores. The people lived in peace, grateful for a ruler who had turned exile into glory. Yet not all was still. Strange rumors drifted in from sailors, of other kingdoms growing restless, envious of the shining city that had risen from nothing. At night, the king often stood upon the walls, staring toward the endless horizon where storms gathered. He smiled, but in his eyes lingered a question. Would wisdom alone be enough to defend what he had built? The winds carried whispers of change, and though the city prospered, destiny had not finished its work. Watch out Part 2.